Hello, my name is Jim Toot, and I'm an Associate Professor of Political Science at Central Virginia Community College. In this video, we'll discuss the presidency. Part 1, the power of the presidency. Article 2 of the Constitution outlines the office of the president. Specific powers are few. Almost all are exercised in conjunction with other branches of the federal government. The bases for the powers of the president in the Constitution include Article 1, Section 7, Paragraph 2, which specifies the veto and the pocket veto. Article 2, Section 1, Paragraph 1, which states that the executive powers shall be vested in a president. Article 2, Section 1, Paragraph 7, specific presidential oath of office stated explicitly, as not in the case with other officers. If anybody watched the inauguration last week, you would have noticed that the vice president takes a different oath of office as an officer of the United States than the president takes as president. Article 2, Section 2, Paragraph 1. He's the commander-in-chief of the armed forces and state militias when they're acting in their federal role. The governor is the commander-in-chief of the state militia when when they're operating in their state capacity. Article 2, Section 2, Paragraph 1. He can require opinions of departmental secretaries. Article 2, Section 2, Paragraph 1. He can give reprieves and pardons for offenses against the United States. Article 2, Section 2, Paragraph 2. He can make treaties, appoint ambassadors, executive officers, and judges. But remember, the treaties have to be approved by the Senate. Ambassadors, most executive officers, and judges also have to have Senate confirmation. Article 2, Section 2, Paragraph 3. He can make recess appointments when Congress goes out of session. Article 2, Section 3. He is required to give a State of the Union message and make recommendations of legislative measures to Congress. He can convene special sessions of Congress. He receives ambassadors and other ministers, and he shall take care that the laws be faithfully executed. The presidents exercise only one power that cannot be limited by other branches, the pardon. If the president pardons an individual, that pardon power is absolute. So controversial decisions like President Gerald Ford's pardon of his predecessor, Richard Nixon, for crimes he committed or may have committed, or President Jimmy Carter's blanket amnesty to all who avoided the draft during the Vietnam War, could not have been overturned. Presidents have more powers and responsibility in foreign and defense policy than in domestic affairs. They are the commanders-in-chief of the armed forces. They decide how and increasingly when to wage war. Presidents have the power to make treaties to be approved by the Senate. The president is America's chief diplomat. As head of state, the president speaks for the nation to other world leaders and receives ambassadors. The Constitution directs presidents to be part of the legislative process. In the annual State of the Union address, presidents point out problems and recommend legislation to Congress. The president can convene special sessions of Congress. Presidents can veto a bill passed by Congress, returning it with a written objection. Now remember, the Constitution requires that he provide his objections in writing, so Congress knows why he vetoed the bill. Congress can then override the veto. Finally, the Constitution instructs presidents to be in charge of the executive branch. Along with naming judges, presidents appoint ambassadors and executive officers. These appointments require Senate confirmation. If Congress is not in session, presidents can make temporary appointments known as recess appointments without Senate confirmation, good until the end of the next session of Congress. The Constitution's phrase, "He shall take care that the laws be faithfully executed," gives the president the job to oversee the implementation of laws. Presidents are empowered to issue executive orders to interpret and carry out legislation. They supervise other officers of the executive branch and require them to justify their actions. Congressional limitations on presidential power. Almost all presidential powers rely on what Congress does or does not do. Presidential executive orders implement the law, but Congress can overrule such orders by changing the law. And many presidential powers are delegated powers that Congress has accorded to presidents to exercise on its behalf, and that it can cut back or rescind. Congress can challenge presidential power single-handedly. One way is to amend the Constitution. The 22nd Amendment was enacted in the wake of the only president to serve more than 2 terms, the powerful Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Presidents now may serve no more than 2 terms. The last presidents to serve 8 years, Ronald Reagan, Bill Clinton, George Bush, and Barack Obama, quickly became lame ducks after their re-election and lost momentum towards the ends of their second term when attention switched to contests over their successors. Impeachment gives Congress sole power to remove presidents, among others, from office. Article 1, Section 2, Clause 5, and Article 1, Section 3, Clause 7. It works in 2 stages. The House decides whether or not to accuse the president of wrongdoing. If a simple majority in the House votes to impeach the president, the Senate acts as a jury. House members are prosecutors, and the Chief Justice presides. A 2/3 vote by the Senate is necessary for conviction, the punishment for which is removal and disqualification from office. Prior to the 1970s, presidential impeachment was deemed the founders' rusted blunderbuss that will probably never be taken in hand again. Up to that time, only one president, Andrew Johnson in 1868, had been impeached over policy disagreements with Congress and on Reconstruction of the South after the Civil War. Johnson avoided removal by a single senator's vote. Since the 1970s, the blunderbuss has been dusted off. A bipartisan majority of the House Judiciary Committee recommended the impeachment of President Nixon in 1974. Nixon surely would have been impeached and convicted had he not resigned first. President Clinton was impeached by the House in 1998, though acquitted by the Senate in 1999 for perjury and obstruction of justice. Presidents claim inherent powers not explicitly stated, but that are intrinsic to the office or implied by the language of the Constitution. They rely on 3 key phrases. In contrast to Article 1's detailed powers of Congress, Article 2 states that the executive power shall be vested in a president. The president's oath of office is spelled out, implying a special guardianship of the Constitution. The job of ensuring that the laws be faithfully executed can denote a duty to protect the country and the political system as a whole. Ultimately, the Supreme Court can and does rule on whether presidents have inherent powers. Its rulings have both expanded and limited presidential powers. For instance, the justices concluded in 1936 that the president, the embodiment of the United States outside its borders, can act on behalf of its foreign policy. But the court usually looks to congressional action or inaction to define when a president can invoke inherent powers. In 1952, President Harry Truman claimed inherent emergency powers during the Korean War. Facing a steel strike he said would interrupt defense production, Truman ordered his Secretary of Commerce to seize the major steel mills and keep production going. The Supreme Court rejected this move. The president's power, if any, to issue the order must stem from either an act of Congress or from the Constitution itself. Respectively, United States versus Curtiss-Wright Export Corporation and Youngstown Sheet and Tube Company versus Sawyer. Only 2 positions in the presidency are elected, the president and vice president. With ratification of the 25th Amendment in 1967, a vacancy in the latter office may be filled by the president, who appoints a vice president subject to a majority vote in both the House and the Senate. This process was used twice in the 1970s. Vice President Spiro Agnew resigned amid allegations of corruption. President Nixon named House Minority Leader Gerald Ford to the post. When Nixon resigned during the Watergate scandal, Ford became president, the only person to hold the office without an election, and named former New York Governor Nelson Rockefeller vice president. The vice president's sole duty in the Constitution are to preside over the Senate and cast tie-breaking votes, and to be ready to assume the presidency in the event of a vacancy or disability. 8 of the 43 presidents have been vice president who succeeded a dead president, 4 times from assassination. The first vice president, John Adams, told the Senate, "I am vice president. In this, I am nothing, but I may be everything." In recent years, Vice presidents are more publicly visible and have taken on more tasks and responsibilities. Vice presidents now have a West Wing office, are given prominent assignments, and receive distinct funds for a staff under their control parallel to the president's staff. The Executive Office of the President is an umbrella organization encompassing all presidential staff agencies. Most offices in the EOP, such as the Office of the Vice President, the National Security Council, and the Office of Management and Budget, are established by law. Some positions require Senate confirmation. Inside the EOP is the White House office. It contains the President's personal staff of assistants and advisors. Most are exempt from Congress's purview. Though presidents have a free hand with the personnel and structure of the White House office, its organizations has been the same for decades. Each president has named a chief of staff to head and supervise the White House staff, a press secretary to interact with the news media, and a director of communications to oversee the White House message. The National Security Advisor is well placed to become the most powerful architect of foreign policy, rivaling or surpassing the Secretary of State. New offices, such as President Bush's creation of an Office for Faith-Based Initiatives, are rare. Such positions get placed on top of or alongside old arrangements. Even activities of highly informal roles, such as the First Lady, the President's spouse, are standardized. It is no longer enough for them to host White House social events. They are brought out to travel and campaign. They are the President's intimate confidants, have staffers of their own, and advocate popular policies. For example, Lady Bird Johnson's highway beautification, Nancy Reagan's anti-drug crusade, and Barbara Bush's literacy programs. The presidency became a complex institution starting with FDR, who was elected to 4 terms during the Great Depression and World War II. Prior to FDR, president staffs were small. As presidents took on responsibilities and jobs, often at Congress's initiatives, the presidency grew and expanded. Not only is the presidency bigger since FDR, but the division of labor within an administration is far more complex. The White House office is now a miniature bureaucracy. A large staff in the White House and the old executive office building next door is no guarantee of a president's power. These staffers make a great many decisions themselves, acting in the name of the president. In fact, the majority of White House decisions, all but the most crucial, are made by presidential assistants.